In this lecture, we will talk about cybersecurity, which is a very important topic. In fact, a topic which is of utmost concern in IoT in general and IIoT as well for the industries. So, in the context of Industry 4.0, whatever we have talked about so far, all these things would be meaningful if people are not much concerned about the security of their systems, the physical systems, the cyber systems, the cyber physical systems in fact, and also the security of the data. The overall the data that is collected and is transmitted through the system, it has to be secured, the privacy of the data has to be maintained, it has to be the data that is received from one person, it has to be trustworthy and so on. So, like this there are different allied issues as well when it comes to cyber security. So, security, privacy, trust, these are all interlinked entities, and these are of utmost concern in the context of any system, and definitely for any internet based system, and much more for IoT and low powered resource constrained systems, IoT, IIoT and so on. So, that is why in the context of Industry 4.0, we need to understand the basic concepts of cyber security, what are the different elements of it, and some of the different types of threats that are there in terms of securing the cyber physical systems in the industries. So, we will look at each of these in detail now. So, what is cyber security? So, it is basically the security of the cyber infrastructure that is there. So, basically in computing what is there is we are talking about not only the cyberspace. In computing we talk about the computing infrastructure which includes hardware, software, etc. Not only the security of the cyber infrastructure, but also the physical security of the machines, of the computing machines, the non-computing machines and so on. So, all kinds of machines, the physical security of the machines on which the cyber infrastructure operate. So, we are concerned about particularly two things. One is the cyber security and the physical security. These are the two different things that we are primarily concerned about in the context of security. So, protecting against what? Protecting against different attacks. Attacks will be performed by entities which want to make some harm to the infrastructure. So, in the context of IIoT, industrial IoT and so on, the fundamental premise is that the machines, the systems etc. are all interconnected. So, if they are all interconnected, we have an internetwork. And if we have an internetwork, we are talking about the potential of different intruders getting into the system and trying to launch some kind of attack to harm the system, the way it is operating, the different data that are being transmitted, stealing the data, overall harming the network, the hardware, the software etc. and the physical machines themselves. So, these are all the different aspects of cyber security in an internet connected world. So, when we are talking about cyber security, we need to talk about how to protect the hardware, how to protect the software and how to protect the data. So, three different hardware, software and data all would have to be protected. So, what happens is that in the case of a cyber physical system, enterprises use cyber security and physical security simultaneously against unofficial access to data centers. I would rather say not unofficial, but unauthorized access to data centers. So, what should we protect, and it is protection against what? So, protection against unauthorized, unofficial change in the data, unauthorized or unofficial deletion of the data and uncertified access. So, protection against uncertified access as well. So, these are the three different things against which the protections will have to be made. So, let us now get into understanding and going back into the understanding about how in general the IIoT systems or IoT systems in general work, and this is something that we have already discussed in significant detail in the past. So, what we have different machines or different we have different physical systems on which there is some kind of sensor that is deployed. So, we have a machine 1 which has some sensor, let us say a machine 2 which has some other sensor, and likewise we have different machines which have one or more sensors. Here I have drawn a single sensor per machine, but it is also possible that a machine would have multiple different sensors. So, these sensors, what they do, we have seen this before, through some kind of a network, these machines are going to send the data to some other infrastructure, and this is where we will have some data center or simplistically some server or something like that, which will get access to the data, which will acquire the data and will run different analytics on it, right. This is typically what is done, and based on the analytics we have also seen that some kind of actuation may be required to be implemented, right. So, this is typically how any IoT system and IIoT system at a very high level is going to work. So, what are the different layers over here? So, we have over here we have sensors which will sense the environment, the physical environment in which they operate, collect the data, pass it through some network, then this data. So, this data that is being sent through the network will have to be analyzed and some actuation may be required over here, and actuation may be there, or even what might so happen is the data would be, the analysis of the data would be displayed in some kind of application software. So, now we if we are talking about cyber security, these are the things that we need to keep in mind. We have to holistically we need to protect this system from unauthorized, unintended access and potential harm to the system. So, we have to protect from it. So, how do we do it? So, for this what we need to do is we need to consider where are these protections required. So, one thing is that the data that is received from these sensors, we have to protect it. So, we have what? We have data or information security, right. Then we have to do what? This is number 1. Number 2 would be finally the data will have to be sent through the network. So, we need to have network or inter-network security. We also need to ensure that these applications that are running on this system, like these ones, these also will need to be protected. So, we are talking about application security. There are few other types of security concerns that will have to be there. So, the users, the end users who are using the system or are different actors taking part in the system, they will also need to be educated enough to use the system properly, and that there are some potential issues with security of the system, of the infrastructure, of the data and so on. So, we are talking about end user education for security. And finally, overall the operations that are being carried on security of the operations. So, operational security. So, we have these as the different security concerns in the context of IoT or IIoT. Okay. So, going back, these are the main components of cyber security: application security, information security, data security, information or data security, network security, operational security and end user education. These are the different components of cyber security. So, let us take up each of these one by one. Application security basically ensures that you are protecting the different applications from outsider threats. So, basically some software, hardware and procedural methods could be used for this particular protection. So, what is required is to have some kind of protection, that means some kind of countermeasures at the software level as well as at the hardware level. Software level, one could use different application firewalls for this particular protection. At the hardware level, countermeasures could be using some kind of proxy or router or similar kind of device which will have the protection against this kind of outsider threats. So, these are the different measures that could be taken. Information security, it is basically recognized as a subset of cyber security, where we are talking about a set of strategies that should be adopted, which will have some policies associated with it, some tools and so on. And these policies and in fact the tools also are supposed to filter the different threats based on certain rules. And basically what is going to happen is, as a consequence of implementation of all these different policies, rules, etc., we are going to have a we will maintain the availability, the integrity and the confidentiality of the data, and this is very paramount. So, information security, protecting the availability, integrity and confidentiality of the data in the context of businesses and industries is very important. Network security, as the name says, we have to protect our network from unauthorized access. So, basically the physical and software actions that would be required for protecting the network architecture, those processes will have to be laid down. So, network security would provide protection from unauthorized access, improper use, fault, deletion, demolition and so on. So, it is a protective platform. It is a protective platform that will have to be created on top of the basic network for protecting from unauthorized users, protecting from damage, unauthorized access and damage to the existing infrastructure like computers, etc. and so on. So, this is basically the network security. So, network basically is a vulnerable point through which potential attackers can get in and launch different attacks. Operation security is an analytical action which categorizes the information benefits, and for protection of these information benefits, it regulates the control. So, protection is an important factor in business perspective. Because of the operational security operations, the business actions are going to be protected. End user education, end users are the biggest security risks for an industry. they are the first to be compromised in terms of security. So, employees and the users, end users in fact, typically do not have all types of idea about the information threats to the infrastructure and so on. So, these end users can be the vulnerable points in terms of security. So, they will have to be educated enough so that unintentionally they do not open the doors for the attackers. And as cyber crimes are increasing, it is more important for the industry to educate their employees about potential cyber attacks. So, what are the different types of cyber security threats? Cyber security threats are varied, they are of different types, and going through and understanding all of them is a Herculean task by itself. So, we will try to go through some of the different types of cyber security threats, but these are only a sum, not everything is possible to be understood and covered in this limited time lecture. So, ransomware is a very common type of attacker, common type of attack. It provides a facility to the attacker in which the attacker locks the user's computer files by using an encryption, and then the attacker will demand some money in order for them to lock the system to be further used by the legitimate users. So, they will lock the system from being used. One of the examples of this type of attack is the Locky. So, this basically Locky is a ransomware type of attack. Malware, and as this name suggests, it is a computer program which is used to disturb the computer user, such as different computer viruses, spyware and so on. And spyware, computer viruses etc., we are already familiar with, like Trojan horse etc. So, these are the ones that basically they disrupt the normal operation of the computers and the cyber infrastructure, and they may or they may not basically protect, they may not disturb completely, they may not disrupt the functioning of the system completely, but at certain operations, certain procedures, certain processes might be disrupted, and that will basically disturb the regular user from performing their legitimate tasks. Social engineering, this attack involves human interaction to mislead the users. Social engineering breaks the security policy to get critical information which is typically already secured. So, security policies are basically broken in this kind of social engineering cyber security attack. So, examples are watering hole and pretexting. Phishing is a form of attack where false information is sent, and these information are basically in the form of sending false emails which have been sent through recognizable sources, and the aim is to get critical data such as login information or credit card information and so on. So, phishing attacks, those of you who are already in the emails, you know that many emails you get which are basically phishing attacks, which will ask you for credit card information, the login information, saying that the email account is going to be invalid after a few days and so on. So, these kind of attacks are going to be made, and that will basically, if somebody is not already educated about the potential threats from these kind of attacks, then the user would supply the credit card information that is requested, or supply the username and password to the attacker unintentionally, and that way they will lose access to their system. So, example of this thing is Google Docs phishing and Dropbox phishing attacks, and there are like these different types of other phishing attacks that are possible on different systems. Now, let us go back to the industrial internet. So, when we are talking about industrial internet, we are talking about typically use of different things, sensors, actuators etc., internet of things, right. So, internet of things, computers, people, machines, all together are different participants in the development of the industrial internet. So, basically the industrial internet enables the the industrial intelligent actions to use advanced data analytic tools for getting desired business results. Examples of industrial internet are basically outcomes such as having autonomous cars, intelligent railroad systems and so on. So, for industrial internet, IIoT, security issues are important, and securing the standards for securing these systems are required to be designed. So, industries will need to use diverse systems and equipment, but everything will be integrated on the smart factory platform. So, when we are talking about industries, certain things are legacy. Some systems are legacy systems which have been there for decades in the industry, whereas certain systems might be the recent ones which are already, which have already been built to be secured. So, legacy systems particularly should be taken seriously in the process of implementation, because these systems might be the points of vulnerability for launching different attacks. For the attackers to get into the system, the legacy systems could be the ones which could be the vulnerable points, because those days, earlier days, security was not well understood, systems were designed not to be always secured and so on. So, there are some potential possibilities of leaving some points in those systems through which basically the attackers can launch the attacks. So, every weak line in the production system in the industrial process puts the whole factory at risk. So, leaving security at the hands of the individual IIoT implementers is consequently dangerous. So, what are the cyber security requirements in the context of IIoT and Industry 4.0? The first one is the basic one, the fundamental one, which is not only applicable for IIoT, but for any computing system. This is known as the CIA triad. C stands for confidentiality, I stands for integrity, and A stands for availability. And the second set of requirements are basically the IIoT specific requirements, which talk about reliability and safety. So, confidentiality in the CIA triad stops from unauthorized disclosure of information. I stands for integrity, which ensures that the data cannot be changed in any unauthorized manner, and A stands for availability, which guarantees that the information must be available only to the authorized user. So, in the context of IIoT, these are some of the challenges with respect to provisioning cyber security. So, basically, when we are talking about industries, we are talking about machines where different sensors, actuators are all deployed, and these nodes are all internetworked, they are all interconnected. So, basically, if you need to have such a kind of system, there is some kind of a transformation that the industries will have to go through to transform from the physical systems, the standalone physical systems without these kind of infrastructure that has been existing for years, and then transforming into something that is more smarter machines, connected machines with sensors, actuators and so on. So, this transformation will have to take place. So, now when this transformation is going to take place, you have to take into account all these different points of vulnerability that can be potentially introduced through this transformation process. So, when we talk about transformation, capabilities such as manufacturing, logistics, shipping, healthcare and industries, these will have to be taken into consideration differently in the context of industrial internet. So, what might happen is one might incur data breaches, which increases different types of cyber crimes and cyber threats, because there are different types of attacks that are possible. So, cyber security for Industry 4.0, we already have different traditional cyber security issues which will need to be taken into consideration, like that confidentiality, authenticity, integration, non-repudiation, access control and so on. Plus, we are gradually trying to make our machines and different devices in the industry smarter. So, we are introducing computers, networks into our systems. So, there are some new internet security issues that will have to be identified through this introduction and transformation process. So, these new security issues will have to be identified, and the potential attacks that can come in will also have to be analyzed, identified and then resolved. So, different methods will have to be devised for handling the different security issues, security threats in the context of Industry 4.0. So, different methodologies have been proposed, different algorithms are there, one of which is for cyber attack detection, a computational intelligence system platform which can predict if there is some kind of attack that is going to come in the future. So, here basically this platform implements an algorithm that is required, which basically combines and filters the data, and the data that is collected will be analyzed to basically identify whether there is a potential threat that can come in the future. So, this is the CIS system that, and this is how it performs. And another one is the software defined cloud manufacturing architecture. In this basically you have three parts of the system. One is the software plane, second is the hardware plane, and the third is the Ensemble Intelligence Framework, the EIF. The software plane basically consists of different control elements, the CEs, and each of these CEs is used as the data tap points, since they have deep observation into the communication and activities. In SDCMA, the streaming data is supplied to the EIF by the CE, and the sense data is detected by the EIF, and this EIF is also responsible for detecting the abnormality. So, with this we come to an end of this lecture. So, what we have done is we have understood the essence, the why cybersecurity is important, the essence of it we have understood, the different elements of cybersecurity, the possible types of attacks that might be launched on these IoT and IIoT platforms in Industry 4.0. So, we have understood all of these, the basics of these, and if you are interested to know more in depth of these things, these are some of the references that is given in front of you, and so you can go through them, and there are many different other references that can also be obtained through some kind of search. You will be able to get the different other references talking about different issues, different solutions and so on. So, cyber security, security for IoT, security for IIoT are hot topics nowadays, and lot of research are going on these topics. So, if you are indeed interested to drill deep down into each of these issues, you have to basically go through these different literature that are available. And if you are also interested, if you are a security researcher, you might be interested to implement them. So basically for that also you need to go through these different literature in these references and outside in more detail. With this we come to an end. Thank you.